Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Tamalkov.
Happy Wednesday, dear audience. As you know, we are on a mission to bring together some of the most caring leaders from every domain and every corner of the world. And today we have the privilege to be joined by someone special that dedicated a significant amount of time of his life to help others. And he's actually helping people in many different ways, but he's very well known for the podcast he's created, Beyond the To-Do List. And I have the privilege to welcome Erik Fisher. Thank you for joining us today, and it's a really privilege to have you.
Well, thank you, Marian. It's an honor to be here as well. I'm very excited to talk with you.
Erik, first of all, in this day and age, there's so many things that are fighting for our attention, and it's more often people want quick fixes, want strategies, wants really solutions, and we'll try to deliver to some extent, but it's not always easy when you have just a little bit of the picture, not the system. And I would love to learn more about your journey. First of all, how did you decide to launch the podcast 10 years ago? I mean, that was pioneering at that time. I'm just trying to think of who was even doing podcasting, and were you one of the very few, that was out there?
Yeah, well, I wasn't the first, that's for sure. But I first discovered podcasts in the year 2005. Apple at the time, in June of 2005, or maybe July, one of those J months in the summer, they released an update for iTunes. And I was sitting at a data entry job at the time, and it pops up on the screen on my Dell computer. It says, "We have an update to iTunes." And I said, well, then I've got a reason to get up and refresh my coffee and use the restroom real quick. And so I did that loop, came back down, took a sip of coffee, fired the music back up. But then I saw over to the left in the sidebar, there was this word in this category, and it said podcast. And I clicked in and I thought, what is this? Oh, it's radio shows that I can stop and start at any time. So I don't have to, I love music, but I don't just have to listen to music now as I'm sitting here at my day job. And that was when, in a lot of ways, my world changed. I was aware of the fact that it existed. So I started to dive into shows. I instantly knew at some point I was going to do one, because I was a communications major and had done radio internships and things like that, as well as video, while I was a college student. And fast forward about 2 years, I'm listening to a bunch of shows. I start one with a friend. We record in his spare bedroom, leave our equipment set up. We'd go home on our lunch hour from work, record an episode, and then come back. And it was a comedy show. We were doing kind of our own version of a late night talk show. And it was fun. And it was us doing our Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, just getting practice in public. We'd get feedback. It was really, really fun. And so fast forward to doing few different co-hosting things throughout the years. August of 2012. So we're coming up on actually 11 years now in this coming August, and launched the show. And it was a journey, but I just, the reason to start the show at that time was I wanted to replace one that was phasing out and that I was a co-host on, and I had room to do anything I wanted. And I thought, well, what do I want to do? I want to talk to people about how they do the amazing work that they do. How do they manage their time? How do they manage their energy? How do they do work-life balance? How do they stay creative when they don't feel like it? And that was just starting point topics. And I thought, man, this almost sounds like a productivity show, but it's more than productivity. It's beyond the to-do That's the title. And so started to come up with possible guests and possible topics, and then knew I had a yes in a friend to get Michael Hyatt to jump on. And then that was kind of a key leveraging point to then opening more doors. And then the rest is history. I've been doing the show ever since.
Wow, that's super exciting, Eric. Listening to your story is just inspiration. And one of the reasons why we started Leaders Who Care is because how you rise matter. It's not just the end outcome, but how do you get there is equally important. And this is what we wanted to show to especially the up and coming generation, that uh, being a leader who cares is not a weakness. In fact, that is the sustainable way to do great things. And similar to what you just shared here, we wanted to talk to all those great leaders beyond how do they do their great work. And you've just touched on a few very interesting topics. Like, you've got a lot of wisdom that we want to touch on and talk about, of some of the questions or attempts that you're trying to answer. I'm sure you've learned so much. Probably one of the reasons is that you're excited, you're feeding from that. But for the audience, it's difficult to summarize 10 years, right, of experience to what you've done. But it will be of a great value if you can share some of your um, most impactful learnings that you have done, and you have accomplished, especially on one end, we can separate it to the podcast itself, but also in terms of your personal life. How did that impacted you once you had a privilege to host so many great people?
Yeah, well, we can go a bunch of different places here. I think first and foremost, I mean, again, it's not nothing to consistently do anything for that amount of time. And I think, and I don't want anybody to get any kind of wrong impression here. There has not been an episode every single week from the point I started until now, but there has been in the recent years. So early years, I think the first 16 all at once, and then said, okay, that's the first season, so to speak. I didn't designate it that officially, but then I took about 2 months off, recorded more, and then came back again. And then for the most part from that point forward, with the exception of maybe a week or two here or there, it's been pretty much every week. And there's a lot of, I've said to people, they've said, well, how has the show changed over time? Well, it's been like 5, 6, 7 different shows through that time. Now, is the core of it still the same, where I'm curious and I talk with somebody and learn from them and have a great dialogue with them for the sake of, one, myself, and two, the listeners? Yes, that doesn't change. But in terms of topics we address, or what a lot, like, for example, currently we've already now had at least 2 to 3 episodes that have either directly or indirectly reference or talk about AI, as that has been a prevalent thing recently. So and again, that's something I wasn't intending to talk about much. Although I did do one 2-3 years ago, back when it wasn't as, like, nobody was talking about it, and it was definitely not a productivity tip, tool, trick, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I would say there's definitely things that have changed. So for example, hiring an editor, way too late in the process. Should have done it years and years ago, but didn't, because I didn't want to let it go. I wanted to have final say. But what I learned was that having, and it took a unique person. It took a person who I had known as a college friend for over 20 years, who was an avid podcast listener. I said, hey, can you take a listen? Can you do this? And he, give and take, back and forth, we perfected it. And now I trust him completely. I know he knows what I want it to sound like, look like, etc. And so I have no qualms about handing over the show, all the pieces that are recorded, and just letting him run with it and finish it and publish it. And so trust issues, trust me, delegation, that's definitely one of them right there. And just learning to batch process seasonally. And, like right now we've got recorded into July and others on deck for August, September, because I don't love recording in the summer that much. My kids and family are all at home during that time, but that's, something you have to work with, seasonality in terms of holidays, or taking breaks, or making sure you can, come back around. It's kind of like creating seasons without officially labeling it that. So.
That is, I'm just thinking here about sustainability, Eric. What helped you to stay? What gave you the strength, and really because 10 years is 11 years now, as you mentioned, coming towards. you really need to not only determination, but you need strength. You need really power. What kept you going, and what is your advice to people perhaps that are doing podcasting?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things to consider is definitely. I think that one of the things to consider is definitely planning ahead. Again, I mentioned seasons a second ago. I think that's really the thing that I figured out makes the most sense in terms of, okay, you can't just, okay, disclaimer. It's different for everybody. Some people, they can show up the same day every week, record something, do it themselves or turn it over to someone else, publish it, the end. That's one way of doing it. Another, which works better for me, is like, for example, like this Friday, I'm recording 2 different episodes to finish out July and then into August, September, etc. It's to prepare a bunch and then record a bunch and then push a bunch through and prepare it for marketing, etc. So it's not to stay in the mundane too long. It's to, oh, good, I get to be creative. I get to look through these books. Like it's research season, or it's research week or 2. And then it's, oh, and now it's recording week. And now it's, so being able to alternate helps me specifically. I know that that's also not something for everybody, because they would say, oh, I don't know if I can record like 2 or 3 or 4 in a week. For me, if you separate them on different days, or even maybe it's just one day that has 2, great. You flip the switch, you get in that record mode, and then you're good to go.
Well, thank you for sharing this advice. Indeed, there's a different pros and cons on both, and but you're here, and you have really your curiosity brought you to where you are, and you've learned so many things. What is the most surprising thing that you've learned from, or some of the most surprising things? You've learned many along those years.
I would say that, for example, one of the most surprising things, although it shouldn't have surprised me, is a person like, say, Michael Hyatt takes a nap every single day. And a lot of people would think, wait, what? How do you have how do you have time for that? 2, really? Does that really make much of a difference? And then 3, I say, 1, I've tried it, and 2, yes. So it's surprising. You'd think, oh, well, somebody that's the head of a company, like, how can they afford the time? And his response is, how can you afford not to? You need that refresh so you can get the rest of the day. It's not even that you need to fall asleep. It's that you really just need to take, it's whether you fall asleep or not, where you become slightly unconscious or not. Because again, you're only talking 20 minutes, 45 minutes, somewhere in that window of just turning the brain off, resetting for the day, and then starting back up with new energy. And I got to say, like, that, as well as like taking a walk outside, these sound like mundane things. I mean, they sound like normal everyday things. They are, but we just forget. We get so glued into being in front of a screen and trying to, white knuckle the keyboard, so to speak, and get stuff done. But what we don't realize is when you just do that, your energy wanes over time, and your focus and attention, they dissipate, and it becomes much harder to just, grind it out with willpower. Instead, it's, how can I do focused, great, excellent work for half an hour to an hour, and then stop, refresh, switch back to that same task or a different one, and then move on. And I think that's been real key.
Well, now, because we talk about care, and I always say to people that you got to take care of you first before you can overflow to others. There's also a different points of view, of course. That's really this is sometimes the real testament is, can you take care of someone when you barely have strength to take care of yourself? There's a different points of view, but both are valid. The question here that I have for you is, tell us more about some of those really advices and tips that how to manage the energy and how to, because you talk about energy, you talk about creativity. These are 2 important topics that I'm interested in today that would like to discuss with you. And I'm sure you have an opinion, because you had a chance to talk to a lot of great people.
Yeah, I would say that, one of the things that I think is key is, um, and I think you were kind of alluding to this a second ago, is that they say every time you get on a plane, they go through the whole spiel of, here's where the things are. If the mask drops down, put it on yourself first. It's that principle, right? Like, how are you going to, regardless of, the people that you care about and caring about them and wanting to serve them, you are ineffective if you're not taking care of yourself first. And so you have to put your own mask on first. It's not selfish. It's actually selfless to say, okay, now that I am good, I can fully show up for others.
Yes.
Well, how do you make sure you can show up, and how do you manage time and energy better? So one of the things, so for example, like I don't have any guilt about this. This morning, I decided I'm going to let myself sleep in because I had not been getting good enough sleep. Sleep is key. Sleep is underrated. Sleep is key. People think that, no, I need to get up super early and I need to stay up super late, hustling in the margins and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, but you also need to get enough sleep, because not every hour is as productive as every other hour. So you need to know, when you best can work. If it's going to take you, if you have a specified task that is going to take you 1 hour, and it ends up taking you 2 to 3 because you're doing it at the wrong time of day and you're tired and cannot focus, you've wasted that extra 2 hours, 1 to 2 hours on top of what it normally would have taken. And so sleep is key. So it's about knowing your chronotype as to whether you're more of a early riser or a normal midday riser or a night owl. There are different terms for this that I've talked with a different sleep doctor about, Dr. Michael Bruce. He's got a great book called Chronotypes, or it talks about chronotypes as well. And we talk all about that. And then there's certain times of day that are best for everyone. And we're all different. Now we fall into like 4 different groups. It's not just night owl and morning person. It's much different than that. There's 2 other types. But once you kind of know where you fall, then you can lean into those times that are optimal for certain tasks, and suddenly getting into that flow state and that focus and getting stuff done can happen a lot more. Well, so for example, again, I said I allowed myself to sleep in this morning. I woke up normal time, kind of drank some water, laid back down, and got a little extra sleep, and then had the coffee, and then started the day. So it just kind of made up a little bit of extra time there. So sleep is key. I'm trying to think of what else. As far as energy goes, honestly, intervals. Treat it almost like, you wouldn't, when you go to the gym and it's back, it's back day, or it's leg day, or it's arm day. You're not doing one machine. You don't just go into the gym and do that one machine 100 times in a row. No, you do a rep of however many you do sets. You do sets with how many reps. So you do a set of 20, that's 20 reps. Then you move to a different machine and you cycle through. And as you are alternating on those different machines, you're giving those muscles a chance to breathe and not technically recover, but kind of. And then you move on to the next one, and you're going to come back around, but you're doing that circuit training. And then the next day, you're not doing arms again, you're doing legs that day. So if you can kind of differentiate which days are for certain themed types of tasks, and then also alternating certain tasks within those specified themed days, you can catch breaks. And actually we can jump in and talk about breaks and how to optimally take a break in a second. But do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Absolutely. No, that's really important, because it is about being productive and being effective, but also enjoy. Don't lose your joy over it. It's like really have the ability to. And sometimes it's not always easy, because you mentioned it could be a number of other factors influencing. But when you have a good sleep, and if something goes wrong in the morning, it may affect your productivity, may affect your energy. But the question is how not to, how to be in the flow. Or we all humans, so we're not robots. Like we probably talk about AI and how much they'll take away from us in the future. But AI can be a great servant, so we could really use that. for us. So I'm really with you on these topics. The question is, what else? If we're just talking that one particular thing, it's all known, but what is there a system that you've deployed that you use effectively? Because people are interested often in a much more comprehensive routine system that really helps them, because and we start to see some of those let's say patterns in certain people, leaders, and successful entrepreneurs or leaders in matter of fact. And because it's not about just being successful and burn out, it's about being successful and being sustainable and also have fulfillment. Because what's the point of all this if you're not fulfilled? So just listening to you, I'd love to get a little bit more on that. Continue on the breaks, continue on all the areas that you think really help us to manage our energy. Because if we can take care of our energy, we need power, we need energy to do all the things we need.
Well, let's first talk about breaks for a little bit. I'll fill you in on that. And then I think what would help is talking about time blocking and scheduling and kind of the review process with that. So going with breaks first. So I had a guest on, of course, at this point, I don't really remember. I've had so many different people talk about it, but when we're talking about breaks, we're talking about pausing work and then refreshing yourself. And the best way to do it is to do the opposite, as many opposites of what you were doing during the workflow. So for example, I'll just say, like, right here, right now, I don't call this what we're doing right now work per se. This is fun for me. But if I was sitting here working, then I would be sitting, not moving. Two, one, I'm stationary. Two, I'm sitting. Three, I'm staring at a screen. Four, I am inside. I'm not outside. And five, or whatever number, I am losing track now, but I'm not, right now we're interacting, but if I was sitting here working alone, then I wouldn't be interacting with anybody. So then the key is to flip as many of those switches as you can. So I said I was sitting, I would stand up. Number two, instead of staying at the desk at a standing desk, I would leave the desk for the break. Three, I would, I don't remember what I said. Oh, staring at a screen. So what I don't want to do is go then stare at a TV or my phone or an iPad or another screen. I want to not be looking at screens. Number four, I think I said, I was inside. I want to get outside. So this one gets tricky in certain weathers, but hey, if there's a way to just get fresh air, like if there's an overhang, even if it's cold out, like put a jacket on, go let the dog out, walk around the block. If it's nice weather, take a quick, 5-minute break, walk around the block. Those kinds of things. Another one is if you were not interacting with people, interact with them. Have a phone call. Yes, you can use your phone for that. Or talk face to face with somebody. Do the water cooler thing. Or if you were interacting with a lot of people and that was part of your work, isolate yourself. Take some time to be by yourself. So it's flipping all those switches, as many of them as you can. That's what gives you an optimal break. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Fantastic. Really good to hear that, because it's so simple, yet it's I love this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because it gives us really a kind of a framework that we can think about and say, what can I do opposite to what I do when I work? So that's the simplest way to remember. If you're doing all those things, try to do it completely the opposite in your break time and refresh. What else do you think is helping us? And then, of course, that may transfer towards the creativity, because I believe if you have energy, you're more creative. It links, to the other.
Yeah, well, and especially in terms of creative, I think that, again, doing something outside of what it kind of folds into that. If you were doing creative work, maybe you need to let your brain breathe. Or right before you leave for your break, like, set things up, let it sit, let it lie, and then walk away. Again, instead of going out and putting headphones in and well, maybe you were, maybe you weren't. I don't know. Again, it's do the opposite thing. The way to spur creativity on is in a lot of same ways, the way to take a best break. Your brain's still going to work on that problem. Your brain is still trying to be creative. It subconsciously still wants to work. And for some of us, that's a problem. We want to like have a complete brain shut off from work, and it can be hard. But one of the things that I'll do is I'll say, okay, I don't have the answer to this problem. I don't have the solution to it. I'm going to go for a walk. And if I was listening to music or a podcast while I was doing the work, I'll go walk in silence. Or if I was sitting and trying to be creative in silence, what I'll do is I'll put headphones on and listen to something completely other, whether it's music for mood or a podcast for entertainment or education. And that switch, again, it flips another switch so that you get new ideas. Or again, one of the other things you can do is just, I still believe in magazines. I don't know if everybody else does, but a lot of us are just used to flipping open an iPad or a phone and just flipping through the news or whatever. I like to pick up a magazine and flip through it. It's tangible, it's creative, it's not digital. You use a different part of your brain because of that, and it can spur on different ideas. And so maybe even just walking around the house while looking at a magazine or sitting and doing a magazine, because often I'll be using my desk here as a standing desk. So I want to take a sitting break as my break, right? So again, very much the way to spur or be creative is to seek out and turn on or turn off other inputs that inspire you or get you in a certain mindset or mood.
What comes first, do you think, for obviously to be productive and have that continuous flow of energy, creativity? Is it motivation or discipline?
It's both. It's definitely both, because you can sometimes not feel motivated, but if you've got discipline, you'll still sit back down in the seat and do the work. But at the same time, it's kind of nice to know. Todd Henry has a great of Accidental Creative, has a great book, and I forget the title, but I think it's the Motivation Code. But it helps you. It comes with a test, and you can take it, and you will discover the things that most motivate you. So motivation is not lost, but you definitely, I would highly suggest that is one of my top 10 books, probably, as far as productivity goes.
Would love to hear for the other 9. But when you talk about here, you've touched really a string. So you couldn't, based on your comment, you can actually rotate motivation or discipline, whichever works first for you. And when you feel down, you use the discipline. When you actually feel motivated, use the motivation to do the things you need to do. But typically, I hear you, and whichever comes first, you can rotate.
And ideally they're both there at the same time, but I do think that occasionally one or the other wanes a bit. Not that it's completely gone, but it can feel like it is. And you lean, and it's about having self-awareness to know that that's happening, and then decide to lean in on the other ones more fully.
Would love to hear more about some of the most impactful books that you have felt. You mentioned some. You don't have to put them in order, but just really to mention that what are the books that you recommend to the audience, and what are they for? What category?
Well, I always tell everybody to go with, especially because he's updated it fairly recently, David Allen's Getting Things Done, because that's just a masterclass right there. He's distilled it down and updated it recently. He also, even more recently than the update to the book itself, which had updated language and more, for clarity, etc., came out with a workbook for it. And that workbook is gold, because it simplifies his Getting Things Done methodology even more, but it gives you practical exercises to work it out for yourself as you're going through the
And we
learning.
appreciate we just have the opportunity to celebrate him because he's a leader who cares, and he's been on the podcast twice. So we thank David,
great.
and it's a moment to bring him up in the conversation. Thank you for doing that as well. Fantastic. We really highly recommend and we champion him because, yeah, people get things done, and that's really important. And of course, you can do it in a caring way. That's our advice to everyone. That is important. What else is really impactful, do you think, from the books that you have?
Yeah. Well, and what's funny is I did an episode kicking off 2023, and I think that there's a number of different things in there. I'm trying to think of Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte is another one as well that I think is
that personal brand? You say,
Building a Second Brain.
oh, okay. I heard brand. Okay, second
Yeah.
brain. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, Building a Second Brain. The subtitle, I believe, is a proven method to organize your digital life and unlock your creative potential. And essentially, what he talks about in that one is a process where you collect ideas, put them in a trusted system, let them kind of simmer like a crock pot, and then join those ideas and then use them for creative endeavors.
I love that. That's
So
a great suggestion.
That's definitely one. And in fact, he's coming out with another book in a little bit later this year that kind of dives deeper into the process of implementation for it.
Excellent. Please
So,
continue. No, I'd love
yeah.
to. This is really nice because you summarize a little bit about the books, what they're about, and this is really useful for the audience.
Yeah, I mean, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say, I'll just say all of Cal Newport's books are great. He's got Deep Work, Digital Minimalism. His most recent one was on email in and of itself. He's always talking about focused work and getting into that zone and dealing with distractions, which that's another one. Indistractable by Nir Eyal, Nireyal, Nir Eyal. Indistractable, how to control your attention. And so it deals with internal and external distractions, which is extremely helpful. So that's helpful there. Let's see. I'm trying to think of what else. Oh, another great one by Charlie Gilkey is Start Finishing, how to go from idea to done. And so that's about managing projects from start to finish. That is, I'll tell you what, that is a book that just gets you focused in on breaking projects down and applying them and approaching them and checking things off and making consistent progress. One of the things that's one of the hardest things to do when it comes to productivity.
Fantastic. Really, if any others are coming to mind, please bring them up.
Yeah, let's see. I think, let's see. So I said getting things done, Indistractable, Deep Work. I mentioned Todd Henry's Motivation Code, I believe is what it is. And by the way, you can find all of these. I've got a macro list on Amazon of all the different books that are in my,
we'll put the link afterwards for the audience, just so that they can actually follow up. But I love the summary because you actually, it's like the bling that gives you a couple of minutes of synthesis of actually the book, and is it worth reading? And this is really important if you talk about really leaders of the highest level, whether they're CEOs or executives. And they do follow the podcast and the episodes, and they're faced with number of challenges, especially running a business, their families, their impact. In a way, everybody wants more from them. In reality, they're in a very, very often lonely position. So, and would love to take care of them really with everything, because they do so much, and we believe that if we can take care of those leaders, that they will create a conditions for more people to thrive at work, not survive. So this is a topic I'm deeply passionate about, that what we can brainstorm together. What advice do you think, or advices we could share, or best practices for especially leaders to create an environment where others can thrive, which comes to then first, how can we help them to take better care of themselves so they can provide those conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for leaders to, again, put on that oxygen mask first before then tending to their team is important. There are different ways to go about that. I think, and again, some of the things, whether it's personal or not, it comes down to having good morning routines where, you're not just pulling your phone out and looking for fires to put out first thing. Instead, you say, no, I mean, that's truly putting on the gas mask, not the gas mask, the oxygen mask. That's a different thing. You're not at the dentist or anything like that. Spending that time with yourself, like whether it's while you're making your coffee in the morning, or if you're not, if you have a ritual where you drive to a place where you purchase a coffee, being in that moment instead of being somewhere else while you're going through that ritual, pausing, slowing down, taking time to focus. Or if, again, you're making it at home, you're not, jamming your ears with earbuds and blasting music or playing a podcast. You're noticing the coffee maker. You're appreciating the smell of the coffee. You are tasting the coffee instead of just chugging it down to get the caffeine as quickly as possible. It's having those noticeable moments that then make you a better leader to notice your team and interject and interact with them better. I know that sounds really simple, but it's not common, at least not as common as it used to be, if it was ever common, I guess.
And which is talking about common, what are the most common habits for maximizing productivity?
Well, I think, again, blocking out time for specific tasks. I think that, you put on, you basically say, okay, I'm available. Here's when I'm available and here's when I'm not. And when I'm available, by all means, come take that time. I have an open door policy, but just saying I have always an open door policy doesn't really give you the ability to focus on the things you need to focus on, so that when you are working with your team or they need you, you're fully present. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest gifts you can give someone is your full attention. I mean, that's what the social media is fighting for, right? They want our attention with all the videos, and they're becoming harder and harder. So it's not easy, to kind of be present in the moment, especially with all the distractions we have.
Well, and that is also why I talk about having those morning and evening rituals. And again, sleep plays into that. If you can, a good morning starts with a good night, and a good night starts with having a good shutdown ritual where you're not staring at screens right before bed, and you're not laying in bed with your phone, and you're not then, staring at blue light that's keeping you awake and not letting your natural physiology do its job. And then you you have your evening ritual, which cues you to relax and let the day go. You get a good night's sleep. You get up and you do the rituals that let you put your oxygen mask on as you're starting your day. And then you're present for those that need it.
What are your own practices, Erik? How do you start and end the day?
Well, I like to have an alarm that's for the house that kind of goes off and says, okay, hey, in case you weren't paying attention, it's now like 8 or 9 o'clock.
Just to be a small point here, what type are you, just for the sleep? Because you mentioned what works best for you.
I am kind of a mid person. I'm not an early riser, although habitually I used to be, and I had to be, because I had to be up in order to make sure everybody else in the house got taken care of. So I would get up a little earlier to do my own thing for a while and then be able to turn my attention to them. But normally it's more of a normal, 7-ish waking instead of, and I don't like staying up late. I don't. And I used to, but I don't anymore. So I definitely think it's definitely changed.
Awesome. And how do you take care of yourself? What are the things that you do that gives you this energy, creativity, and really positive attitude to look forward to the next day?
Well, again, it goes back to those routines. Again, it incorporates all the things we've talked about in terms of trying to take breaks at a regular interval. Um, Even putting lunch on your calendar. You'd be surprised at how many times entrepreneurs or people in offices just think, "Oh, I'll just grab something and sit at my desk and eat it."
Hmm.
That's not good. One, it's probably crappy food and not fueling you properly. And then two, you're not pausing. You're not walking away. You're not really taking that break. So putting that lunch break on the calendar so that somebody else can't book a call with you then, that's huge. Um, but aside from that, again, morning and evening rituals are what kind of and weekends, by the way, trying to do, some people it's like, okay, I'm gonna get caught up this weekend so that then come Monday, I feel better. Well, but thing is like if you do work on and off all weekend, then you didn't get a break, and then come Monday, you may be caught up some, but also you didn't maximize your time over the weekend because what normally would have taken you like I said earlier, an hour to do took you 2 or 3, and you didn't use that 3 to recharge yourself and do non-work activities.
We have a question from somebody we both really respect, and this is Stoyan from Productivity Mastery, and he's asking interesting questions, saying, "Eric, what do you do when you have low energy day, but you have an important deadline or decision to make?"
Yeah, I mean, ideally, this is where you've not overdone it on certain things, like say caffeine and such. I know it sounds simple. I know it sounds oversimplified to say just that's a day where you drink more coffee. No, those are the days when those breaks matter the most because you need to be able to say, okay, this one part of this task that needs to be completed before the deadline is going to take me 15 minutes. I'm going to do it for 15 minutes, hopefully get it done, stand up, walk away, maybe take a sip of water, some coffee, walk around the block for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, however long it takes you, and then sit back down and then work on the next piece. So it really goes without saying that it's important to, one, know the deadline, two, know what it is that is needed to complete the deadline, and then break that thing down in manageable, broken down, individualized tasks as much as possible, and then start to check them off. Because as you check them off and then take the breaks and then come back to check another one off, you gain momentum regardless of how tired you are. Now, within reason, you can be super tired and have no energy. But again, it's those kinds of things. And then that's actually, especially when you need to be eating incredibly healthy, bananas, water, almonds, things that are like quick, easy boosts of, pick me up energy, green tea instead of just coffee. Things that L-theanine is a compound that's found in green tea. I actually take a capsule of that when I have my coffee every day instead, so that it doesn't give me jitters. It gives me kind of a long, sustained, more energetic state. So
Well, thank you for sharing this. This is important, and actually making those micro decisions very quickly to really be aware of what you need to do at that in order to meet that task is um, really something that you don't think of often in the moment, unless you have that naturally as a habit. Like you've done it because you've done the to-do list and checklist, and you can make, but it's not always natural for people, for everyone to do that. So this is a good reminder, really, that you can quickly reflect. Even if you have a really super urgent deadline, probably panicking is going to slow you down even more. So and uh, and really important. So that is a great suggestion indeed, and a great reminder.
yeah, and I use a tool sometimes. Actually, I use it all the time. Brain FM, and I have a link for that I can give you as well. That gives you like a bunch of free time on the program. But what it does is it plays music that blocks out distractions, but also has other things like it'll help you get more motivated or put blinders on and kind of like this, so you can just focus at the task at hand. They've got nap versions of it as well, where you can take a quick nap and it re-energizes you as it gets. Essentially, it's scientifically created music that gets your brain waves into a certain state quicker. So,
Well, you might have heard of this Silva method. Have you ever come across it, where it gets you in this state of way that enables you to learn fast, to do things faster? I think it's the alpha waves that we use.
it works like that, I believe.
It's very interesting that we hear various different stages, but it is about really being in the right mind and the right state. Erik, thank you so much. Really being a pleasure to hear a lot of those suggestions and insights that you shared. A final question here for the audience is that relates to more the future. We always like to hear what really people's hopes are and positive thoughts for the future. If there was no limits to for you to make a decision for the future and to make a positive impact, what would you do? What are your hopes for more caring and positive world? What are the things that you'd love to positively change?
I'd love to have some sort of way for people who have differences of opinion to realize they have more common ground than they do, or think they do. You know, if that makes sense. I think there's. I heard it recently. I don't know what podcast I was listening to, but there was somebody who was saying, you know, we have different approaches, or we had initially different perspectives on a specific issue, and I won't go into it because I don't want to politicize. But he said, I started to talk to him and gain more insight onto this person's perspective. And as I asked him questions and we talked, we got more common ground, realizing we both want the same things. It just looks a little bit differently for the areas that we live, but we still both want the same things. It just, and we can both have the same things. We just need common ground to be able to dialogue about that. And I think that's something that's kind of been, with the speed of media and different people that act in it. I think that's just been something that's common ground. I mean, we used to have slower conversations face to face. Now it's all back and forth tweets about how angry we are about, oh, you're canceled and you know. No, I think I just wish people could pause and say, okay, it's another human being, and because of that, I care about you. Can we have a dialogue?
Thank you, Erik. What a great answer. And this is what we wish for all the audience. Please do take care of yourself. Take a pause, take a rest, and take care of everyone around you. Thank you so much, Erik, for being with us today, and blessings to you and your work and your team.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.